the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true.
And it is not a question of a little occultism or a touch of mysticism, Mr. Benton. It is vampires. It is a host of damned souls at Pelham House.
Thy father's spirit, doomed for a certain term to walk the night.
Here, the old gods aren't dead.
And what of the true god?
He's dead. Can't complain.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
You're listening to Paranormal UK Radio.
Hi everybody, welcome to Paranormal UK Radio, the flagship show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm your host, Irene and Mark, and with me tonight, and I'm not going to forget his name because he just reminded me of 5 minutes ago, Mark Johnson.
Hello.
Yeah. How did I do?
Okay.
Did I do it?
And, after 10 takes, that one worked pretty good.
Yeah, it did, didn't it?
Yeah.
I'm quite proud of myself. What do you mean 10 takes? You're going to play the bloopers. Bloopers?
The blooper reel, yes.
One of these days, aren't you? And show me up. You really are. Only our guests know how I bugger things up.
But then I do my editing magic and you come out smelling like a rose.
Yes, that's true. That's very true.
Trust me, she doesn't smell like that the rest of the time.
Sorry?
I said, trust me, she doesn't smell like that the rest of the time, folks.
Oh, you so-and-so. I wear Cartier. What you talking about? £100 bottle. Oh, God. No, I do mess up quite a lot. I've got to admit that. I am very, very sorry, but I've got to keep you on your toes, haven't I?
Well, somebody has to.
Yeah. Yeah, so how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Summer is officially here. The solstice was the other day. And but it's been like gloomy until today. Now we got a lot of sunshine. So took a couple days for summer to kick in.
Well, last week, no, I'm not kidding you, Mark. Last week I had the central heating on because I was absolutely freezing around the Knicker area. And this week, total difference. I tell you, it's so hot out there, and I think today's been one of the hottest days. I know it was 29, 30 degrees in London, and they reckon that it's going to get hotter.
Well,
but I just can't believe it. This is the UK,
It's that global warming coming to get us.
Yeah.
Climate change, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and Wales itself, in the last, couple of months, we must have had 3-4 weeks of sunshine.
Well, if you could always move to down in the American Southwest, go to Phoenix, where it's routinely like 110, 120 most of the year.
Where's Phoenix?
Arizona.
Oh, Arizona?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I got a friend that lives in Arizona.
Well, not so much of a friend.
Yeah, a friend.
Oh, that friend. Oh, okay.
No. You don't know this friend.
No, that one I don't know.
No, you don't know this one. No, but I do have. Well, I suppose there's a couple of friends I got in Arizona, but you're talking about Pilchard. Oh,
yeah.
Oh no, that's not a friend.
No.
Oh, okay, forget it.
Nope.
Next subject. Move on. Where are we going from here?
Oh, well, just wanted to mention that, next week for us over here in the U.S., it's 4th of July. We call it Independence Day. You call it Ungrateful Colonials Day.
We don't call it anything. We really don't call it anything. We don't even celebrate it.
Well, of course, you wouldn't celebrate it. We told you lot to go piss off back to England.
No, you did not. No, you did not. Now, we're going to get into an argument here again, aren't we?
Yeah, I'm right and you're wrong.
You only succeeded because the French came in on your side. But we beat you in a hell of a lot of battles, and if you could make good tea, we would have stayed on for longer. But no, you couldn't make good cup of tea, so that's it.
Yeah. Well, we didn't want to pay. We didn't want to pay your damn taxes, so there you go.
We don't want to pay our damn taxes.
Now, who's bitch now, huh?
Meow.
Yeah. That's okay. The next time we'll be there to save your asses again at the next World War.
Oh yeah, you're going to come in late again, are you?
Yeah. Well,
when it's all over.
Only when it's worth our while, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You know, you seem to, be the ones who think that you can, handle everything yourselves, and we have to come in later and clean up your mess.
That's enough. You devil.
I know. I'd blame it on the ring, but I don't have it.
You don't have a lot at all, do you? Never mind. Okay, let's get on with the show.
All right, let's do this.
Sorry about that, folks, but if we don't have a dig at each other every now and then, we can't get on.
Yeah, somebody has to set her straight.
God, listen to him. Okay, all right.
So
come on, let's go.
Let's do this. Who is our guest tonight?
You tell me who our guest is tonight.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll tell you who our guest is for tonight. Our guest is Brian Sterling-Vete, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Brian. PhD.
Actually, Sterling-Vite, but it's close.
Vite, okay.
They could. I'll tell you what, Brian. I'm sorry, but they can never do anything like that. They can never pronounce anything right.
Well, if you spelled it right, we would pronounce it right.
Vite, that is spelled Vite. You spell it full. Vet is V-E-T.
Well, the E could have been silent.
Well, actually, I'm married to an American, so we have some wonderful conversations about this. In fact, my wife's just published a book for the royal wedding. Of course, Prince Harry married an American, and my wife published a book about being British, being a Brit married to an American.
Oh, lovely.
So,
and all the pitfalls.
So, yeah, it's amazing the language difficulties we run into every day, but it's fun. It really is fun.
Well, tell your wife I sympathize, because you would figure that being that it's called English, that you Brits would know how to speak it, right, Irene?
Oh my God! I tell you, he does my brain in. We must have sent over there on the Mayflower a load of numpties that couldn't read and write properly, let alone talk. Because look what they've got. Just take a look at it.
They took a language and completely butchered it, didn't they?
Oh, they did. They did. It's unbelievable.
But
and
you know what happened after the Revolutionary War? They commissioned Webster to create new words for the dictionary that were not English-spelled words. And this is how this differences started. And he started to simplify things and spell things more as they were pronounced. But unfortunately, he went so far, the Founding Fathers eventually had to say, you know what, Webster, you're going too far. Stop, enough, that's it. And that's why it's this sort of half and half, and that's why you have all this mixture of words that are quite strange to us.
It's not the Queen's English, is it?
No, it's deliberately changed.
New Zealand, they can get it right. They speak the Queen's English.
With their own accent.
What nationality was Webster?
He was a colonial. He was actually a colonial Brit. Really, he was on the American continent. He was from the colonies. So, before the Revolutionary War was declared over, technically they were all British.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. But there's still no excuse.
Well, I will give you that, because, you could take a name like a word like schedule, which is how the Americans pronounce it, SCH, which is not how it should sound out based on its spelling, and yet at least the British do say it right with schedule. Schedule.
But schedule. S.
But there again, that's debatable, because we also, you can say school.
Yeah.
And the SCH there is the hard K again, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Well, you know, we can always blame the Dutch for that. Let's just blame the Dutch for that.
Yeah, they've got to come in somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, good Lord. Well, anyway, our guest, Brian Sterling-Vite.
Correct.
And now, Brian, you are a British author, paranormal investigator, a Guinness World Record holder. We're going to have to find out about that. And a martial arts instructor, as well as an experienced TV broadcaster and producers of documentaries. And you have a new book that came out this year, Paranormal Investigation, the Black Book of Scientific Ghost Hunting and How to Investigate Paranormal Phenomenon. So, officially, welcome to the program. Sorry for all the mess. This is just how Irene and I are usually every week.
Yeah, we have to get all the stress out in one go. So we let it go on the show. You've got
to vent, haven't you?
Yeah, we vent on the show, and then we don't talk to each other for the rest of the week. We ignore each other.
Yeah, at the end of the show, yeah, bye, Irene, have a great night. Hey, you from bitch.
Yeah, neff off.
Piss off. So anyway, Brian, let's talk a little bit on your background. I mean, let's see, you're into martial arts, and you're trained in exercise science, athletic performance. I have to ask, what is your Guinness World Record in?
Well, the one that still stands of all things, because I've had world records in fire stunts, which wasn't planned, I hasten to add. This was years ago. And also in martial arts for block breaking. But the one that still stands is for balance, for plate spinning of all things, for spinning the greatest number of plates at one time, for mass plate spinning. And this was to raise money for the Asian tsunami victims and for Depression Alliance at the same time. So it was all the world records were for good causes. They raised money for either children in need or hospitals or things like this. So they weren't really sort of just for the sake of it, if you see what I mean.
That's fantastic.
Spinning plates.
Yeah, spinning plates. Kind of weird, isn't it?
Oh, I can spin a plate straight at Mark's head.
Yeah. Thankfully, we have a little thing called the Atlantic in between us there. She would probably make a
flying saucer then.
Yes.
Yeah, unidentified.
No, an identified one. This one is coming from you. It's got your name on it.
No, actually, it's got my name on it.
Oh, it's got your name on it, and it's got a hello from Irene.
Yeah. But have I seen you on the television spinning plates then?
Possibly not spinning plates. You may have seen me on the television because you remember That's Life, the TV show with Esther Rantzen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was on that for quite a few weeks in a block at one time. I've been on various shows here and there. But actually, Mark, you may have seen me. I was on a PBS documentary in 2013-14 about the origins of the United States as a nation. And interesting, the conversation you guys got into at the beginning about the Revolutionary War. But I had a documentary crew, and I hosted a documentary at a stately home in England, a 110-room mansion that was mostly derelict at the time. And this was the home of the man who got the Pilgrims onto the Mayflower, the man that taught them their values. Mm-hmm. And the man that helped basically ship them off. It was also where George Washington's mother lived on the estate, and President Quincy Adams' family lived on the estate. And the descendant of Robert Brown, the man who got the Pilgrims on the Mayflower, he is the man who fired the first shot in the War of Independence. So this one place in England was sort of the hub of where the people that formed the United States came from as a nation.
Wow, we're famous for something then.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, that location was paranormally highly active, and we just didn't expect it at the time. It was very much a surprise. We were there to make a straight historical documentary complete with reenactments and all sorts. And on the first night we were there, which you imagine, a 110-room derelict mansion, and It's cold. It was November in 2012, when the shooting first started.
Whereabouts? Sorry about Brian. Whereabouts is this this mansion?
It's in Northamptonshire, which is sort of in the central part of England.
110 rooms.
Yeah, in about 60,000 acres of land, I believe.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, it's spectacular. When you see the thing from the air, it's huge, and it's sprawling. Of course, it's been built on because the original part was built in 1495, I believe, and it was expanded on from there through the years to what you see today.
So is it still derelict, or are they built housing estate on the property anywhere?
Actually, no. It's owned by a private family, and they've been slowly renovating it, and it's now a private residence, and the rooms are slowly being lovingly restored to what they would have been, because it's a Grade 1 listed building, and it's of great historic importance, as you can imagine.
So are they going to keep it like that, do you think, or do you think it'll end up being a hotel?
I don't know. I'm hoping they're going to keep it like that. That's what they say they want to do, but who knows what happens in the future. The children may want to change it, or they may suddenly decide it's too much for them to keep, because let's face it, 110 rooms, that's a big place.
Yeah, it's a lot of dusting.
They've got 2 ballrooms in there, and these ballrooms have got their own orchestra recess pit.
Oh, lovely.
So it's huge. And
it's my type of house, you know that.
Oh, you'd never get bored. There'd always be a separate room for something. And technically, the very first Thanksgiving took place in that hall, because when Robert Brown separated church from state, they celebrated a meal there to give thanks for the separation. And this is what we believe that the pilgrims were advised to take with them. Then, of course, it expanded to Turkey Day, giving thanks to, as they traditionally do in the United States. But this is where it is believed that the roots of Thanksgiving stem from.
From us, over here in the United Kingdom.
Indeed.
Wow.
Yeah, but you didn't give us cranberries. We brought our own, thank you very much. Well, Brian, with your background in so many different things, and you are the author and co-author of a number of different books with your lovely wife, but this one book on paranormal investigation, what prompted you to write this book?
Good question. I've sort of had paranormal incidents jotted throughout my life, and over the years, it's like something's been slowly drawing me towards the closed end of a funnel, sort of to focus me on the paranormal investigating. And I've got another book in the process of being written, funnily enough, about the haunting of Lilford Hall, which was very highly active paranormally. But I've sort of been drawn throughout my life towards this sort of profession, if you like, almost, because I seem to be doing more and more of it almost full-time these days. It started out, perhaps if you go back to the mid-'80s, when I was down in London visiting a friend, and it was at a time when wheel clamping was coming in, and we're staying over in this large sort of Victorian, actually probably Georgian house in the centre of London, in one of the nice areas there. And in the middle of the night, I was aware of a presence that came into the room. Now, I thought it was my friend coming in to check the car to see if the darn thing had been clamped. But no, it wasn't. The next morning, I said, "Oh, what the hell did you come in for?" I could have jumped out of the bed. I was really on guard then, thinking it was a burglar. And she said, "Oh, no, it wasn't me. I've not been up in the middle of the night." And a boyfriend confirmed that. I said, No, we've been in our part of the house all night." He said, "You've seen the Grey Lady." I said, "Grey Lady? What do you mean, Grey Lady?" He said, "Well, apparently one of the serving wenches hung herself in that room, had an affair with the master of the house a number of years, a couple of hundred years ago, whatever it was, and ended up hanging herself there. And ever since then, this grey lady has been seen occasionally and switches appliances on and off. And that was, I suppose, really the start of the paranormal experiences. The UFO experiences go back much further, actually. They go back about 10 years prior to that. If we can sort of group the paranormal and UFOs together, which I suppose technically they are.
Well, yeah, I believe that, because a lot of the paranormal investigations we've done, there's been UFO activity at the same time. So there is some sort of connection there, as far as I'm concerned. I completely
agree with you, Irene. There's more than some, so I think there's a very strong connection. A lot of the phenomena that take place during UFO activity are almost identical to the phenomena that take place in technically paranormal activity that we would call it. So I think the two are very much grouped together. And of course, my first UFO experience was in Derbyshire. You know Derbyshire, Irene, of course, but
yes.
I don't know if you know that, Mark.
Oh, that's where you get Blue John from.
That's exactly right. And this was near those Blue John caves. So the old Roman town, the bath town of Buxton. I was driving at home one night at about 3:30 in the morning. And over the Goyt Valley, over the reservoir area there, I saw to the left of me, where you could see down into the Manchester and Cheshire plains, I could see a red, white, and green flashing light. And I thought, it's a plane going into Manchester Airport. That was at first glance. I thought, nothing of it. It was a clear winter's night, perfect vision. And it was beautiful. Anyway, then I became very much aware that this light was between the valley walls and over the reservoir. It wasn't a plane that was moving. It was stationary. And I was with someone in.
So it was landed.
No, it was actually hovering over the water.
Oh, yeah.
And my pal that was with me, Cliff Twemlow, he was the author and movie maker. I said, Cliff, look at this. And we jumped out of the car, and we were staring at this thing for the longest time. It was making no noise whatsoever. And we just, both of us at the same time, got a really funny feeling that we just shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
So we jumped into the car. We said, we got to go. Yeah, I jumped in the car. We hightailed it out of there. We're driving down to Chapel Henley Firth. You know, it was a frosty night, cold frosty night, but even so, we were risking it on the bends and pushing the car to the limit. And it was one of those nights when you wanted to find a police car. I don't know what we thought
you could never
a police
find
officer
one.
would have done. Who knows? I mean, come on. But we wanted to find a police car, and we didn't. So we got to the police station at High Lane, near Disley there, and we stormed in, and there's an old desk sergeant sat there, and we say, look, we want to report a UFO, and it's actually, it seems to have followed us from Chapel Henley Firth. And the guy, of course, thought we would. I said, you been drinking? No. Are you taking it? No. Look, please believe us. He did believe us. And this is how the police came to log the incident. And this desk sergeant eventually came to the door with us, and of course it was still there. And then he presses the alarm bell, and the last thing we saw was the police cars were driving up towards the golf club to get a better look at this thing, and we saw this darn thing shoot straight up into the sky.
Yeah. But you're talking about it being over water. There's so many reports of UFOs either in water, sucking up water, or hovering over top of water, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. Mark, did you hear anything more about the report of the UFO that was buzzing the USS Nimitz battle group in the Pacific? And that was over water, and it was sucking up the ocean, and it was seen below the ocean, and it was buzzing the Nimitz, I believe, for 5, maybe 6 days.
Yeah? No, I didn't know about that. No. I didn't know that one.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. I've been sort of keeping track of the UFO incidents over there because my wife and I encountered the one that made the papers in October, November time last year. I can't remember when it made the papers, but we saw the light in California with a number of other motorists. We were just leaving Los Angeles, driving north on the Pacific Coast Highway, and just probably outside Oxnard area, we saw this huge light in the sky, probably only about 1,000 feet. And there were a lot of cars stopped by the side of the highway, and we pulled over and we got out, we looked, and it's like, wow, and then things shot off. And that was seen, of course, on civilian and on military radar. In fact, they sent some Hornet interceptors to chase it, and of course it left them for dead. And I think somewhere around Oregon or Seattle area, it shot off up into space, and that was the last that was seen. It made the interceptors look slow.
Yeah. You're talking about UFOs and water and things. Last year when I was in Italy, because I stay on the Amalfi Coast, don't know if you've ever heard of it, the Amalfi Coast.
I know it well.
You do? Oh, I do. Great. Do you?
I know it very well.
I stay between, you've got Amalfi down on the bottom, you've got Ravello at the top, you've got Scala. Yep. I stay in a village called Pontone.
Yep, know it.
Okay.
In fact, my family villa, the Vete family, it's Italian actually. It's the Villa Vete in Pompeii.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, me and you'll have to get together and have a good chat, I tell you. Well, anyway, I've been going there since 1971. And I was out there last year. It was August, I think. Last year I was out there. Or was it July? I'm not sure. July one year, August next, I don't know. September this year. Anyway... And I was standing on the balcony overlooking the sea, looking down the mountainside from Pontone down to Amalfi. And out at sea, this was about 3 o'clock in the morning. And I hope none of my friends are listening because I don't want to give them the spooks out there. But I saw what looked like lights, UFO lights, I don't know what they were UFO, but there were lights out at sea, and they were diving down into the water and then coming up again.
Oh, that's weird.
And there was not fishing boats, I can tell you. Cause
we don't have technology like that.
No, I know fishing boats when they're out at sea, especially off the coast of Amalfi, you know? So, I didn't know your family came from that area.
Yeah, the Villa Vete in Pompeii. In fact, oddly enough, I had that was traced back by the University of Birmingham. I was doing a shoot down there for, I think it was the BBC when I was working with BBC in Current Affairs, and the curator of the museum, she got an unusual name. She said after the show, she said, I'd like a word with you about it. So we did the shoot. It was just about the opening of a canopial jar that they had lost in the archives. Anyway, that was a sort of nothing event. And she said, look, can we use your name as a genealogical study? It won't cost you anything. I said, well, that's fine. So just please I'll give you as much information as possible. I'm curious. And they were the ones that came up with this trace back through the Channel Islands and then Westphalia in Germany and then back to Italy. And that's how I discovered it.
Well, I've been to Pompeii no end of times, you know, and I will be going back to Pompeii again this year because I want to take a bit of some film and do a bit of investigating. Because
have you ever taken a meter there or anything like that?
No, but I've gone there and I've heard voices as I've walked around, and it's not been people. You know, I like to get away from the crowds because the crowds usually stay around, or they basically around the square or the amphitheatre, and I like to get right away on the edge, on the outskirts where there's not too many people around. And I just listen to the voices. You hear the voices. Sounds crazy. Yeah. If you really listen, you can hear.
Have you taken any EVPs?
No, because every time I've gone out there, I haven't gone out there with that sort of equipment. But this time, if I go this time, I'm going to take a voice recorder and one thing or another and a good camera.
Yep. But if you do go look at the Villa Vete, it's quite a famous one. We were wine growers, wine merchants. And obviously there was someone out of town when Vesuvius exploded. Otherwise I wouldn't be here. And it's one of the nicer villas.
Well, I will go definitely. I've more than likely been to that one, actually. But I will definitely, more than likely have over the years. But I will definitely make a beeline for that one. I tell you what, I like walking around there. I know it sounds terrible.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oddly enough, what you were talking about.
When I was young, we used to walk around with a bottle of wine in the middle of the day.
Well, that's even better. It's the only way to travel, isn't it? That?
Yeah, but it's not very good on the cobblestones.
No, not really. Those streets are pretty uneven, aren't they?
Yeah, they certainly are.
But oddly enough, you were talking about the lights on the Amalfi Coast there. Well, that is the area of it's the same sort of area where the town was, I'm not sure which town it was now, the name escapes me, but it was a town along the Amalfi Coast, southern region anyway, that was experiencing electromagnetic pulses that was blowing out electronic equipment, and it was causing fires and shorts and,
when
a lot of damage. Do you remember it?
When was it?
It was going back maybe about 8 or 10 years now. Maybe more, but it was causing a lot of problems, and they thought it was when they did the investigations, they thought that some electromagnetic pulse weapons were being tested by the U.S. Mediterranean fleet, which was based probably only about I think 150, 200 miles away. But of course, then they did more testing and measuring, and of course, it was nothing to do with that. But UFOs were witnessed and seen at the time, and then when the UFO sighting stopped, so did the anomalous events.
That is strange. That's strange.
When you're down there, it's worth checking that out, maybe.
No, vaguely I remember. Vaguely I know something like that happened sometime when I was out there last year. When I remember seeing all these things at the sea, and then you turn, and you're standing on the balcony looking out to sea. Turn and look above the villa that I was staying in to the sky up on the mountains, and the sky would light up, but it wasn't lightning.
It
was like pop. You get a popping sound, and then the sky would light up, flash for a while, and that happened quite a few times. And I never really took much notice of it, but I know it wasn't lightning.
Well, next time you go, it's probably worth investigating that village. Check it out prior to. I'll dig out my notes. I've got notes on that. I should send them to you, because it was a fascinating investigation, and maybe it's worth checking out for you.
Yeah, because I love it out there because there's so much paranormal activity out there. But again, my friends, no, there's nothing wrong with Pontoni. You live there happily. Of course, it's
geothermal, isn't it? There's a lot of volcanic activity.
Well, that's it, yeah.
There does seem to be an awful lot of UFO incidents that take places around geological fault lines.
There's a massive fault out at sea on the Mediterranean, just off the coast there. I've forgotten the name of it now. I have to look it up. It's my friend out there told me about it last year, and I thought, oh, Christ almighty, if that goes, it's going to make Vesuvius and all that look stupid. It goes from Salerno or Sorrento along that coast, right out at sea.
I'm trying to think.
I can't remember what it's called now.
Oh gosh, it's on the tip of my tongue, maybe. But I know the one you mean, and that's probably the one.
It's a big one. It's a big one. It's like, it would do as much damage as Yellowstone.
It's the Dead Sea Fault, isn't it? Is it the Dead Sea Fault that runs right the way through the Mediterranean?
I don't know. She didn't call it like that name. The Italians have got a different name for it.
Okay, maybe.
Yeah. I'll have to find out.
But if you think about it, paranormal activity, there's a lot of reported paranormal activity also in those volcanic areas. I had a lot when I was in Iceland. In fact, that was my first encounter with what I could only describe as being a poltergeist.
Yeah?
In the apartment. Yeah, I was in Iceland in 1985, and I was over there oddly enough, to produce a play with the Icelandic National Theatre, and ended up wrestling the 4 times world's strongest man, John Paul Sigmarsson, on national television, which was kind of like weird. What a combination.
You didn't, did you?
I did. It's
oh my God.
I thought they were carrying the guy in, but no, he was walking on his own. The guy was huge.
Oh, Lord. So you had some poltergeist activity out there then?
Yeah, we had an apartment on a lake in Reykjavik, the lake's called Tjarnagata.
Yeah.
And the apartment we had, it was really, really nice, a basement apartment. And it was actually occurred on the night I wrestled Sigmarsson for the first time. I got back, and my pal and I were saying, let's settle down for the night and just get ease the aching limbs and the bruises, this sort of thing. And Anyway, I was getting changed in my room. He was getting changed in the lounge, and he shouts to me. He said, "Brian," he said, "come in quick." I said, "What's the matter, Cliff?" So I come in. He said, "You won't believe it. The candlestick on the mantelpiece ahead of you, one of them just turned itself over, flipped over." I said, "Go on, no." He said, "Look, wait, it might do it again." Anyway, waited, and the next one, the other candlestick, did the same thing, toppled over. So we both sit down on the sofa, aghast, going, "Oh my God, we've got a poltergeist." Well, that's what we assumed it was, because things started to move in the apartments. And oddly enough, the next day, Sigma's son was going to pick us up. And don't forget, this guy's a 350-pound giant of a man.
Yeah.
And he comes down, he says, "Oh, good morning. Oh, he says, "Maybe I'll wait in the car. This apartment has a bad entity, bad spirits here." He said, he was kind of sensitive, I suppose.
Mm.
But he wouldn't stay in there. And the weirdest thing we saw was one night that my shirt was floating through the air, because we were sharing a room, and we had some beds on each side of the opposite sides of the room. And Cliff shouts at me, he said, "Brian, look at the end of your bed." I look up, in the moonlight I could see. I said, "That's my shirt, isn't it?" It was sort of floating in the air. And then it threw itself against the wall, and I said, "Oh, it's the ghost, isn't it, Cliff?" He went, "Yep." I said, "Okay, good night." And we just turned over, went to bed. We were so tired, we just
Oh God! Well, that makes a change from a sheet floating around, doesn't it?
Oh gosh, indeed. But interestingly, the gym was haunted too. We get in there and he'd like to train early in the morning, and we'd get in there at maybe 4:30 in the morning, and even though we knew there was no one else in, we were the only ones with a key. You could hear the sound of voices and the odd clanking of a weight. Mm-hmm. And it's funny that Iceland is sitting on fault lines. It's sitting on the mid-Atlantic fault.
Yeah.
It's got volcanic activity galore, and of course it's a very paranormally active place. Mm-hmm. There's got to be a connection somewhere with the Earth.
There has got to be a connection, because they're all around the Amalfitana coast, and all down from Campania down to Calabria and everything down to Sicily. You've got Mount Etna on Sicily, spitting her guts up every now and then, and you've got Vesuvius at Pompeii,
Yeah, that's just a time bomb waiting to go off again.
Well, that is, because you can climb a little down the crater, and, well, I've seen it. People can fry eggs down there. You get all these little puffs of smoke coming out the walls of the crater. So, and the smell of sulfur up there is absolutely horrendous.
Yeah, it's not clever, is it? You can be up there and it could just happen. The scientists, with the best will in the world, they can't really predict these things with any kind of great degree of accuracy, can they?
No, but I tell you what, it is one of the best places to sit early in the morning, watch the sunrise. Done that. It's
beautiful, actually. Sitting in Sorrento, overlooking the bay there, you can see Pompeii and Vesuvius in the background, having your breakfast there on the balcony. It's gorgeous.
Yeah. Well, anywhere along that coast you can see Vesuvius, but actually sitting up on Vesuvius early hours of the morning waiting for the sun to rise.
Oh, I've not done that. That sounds spectacular.
Yeah, it is good. As long as it's a clear, it's not a lot of low cloud. It's fantastic. Yeah.
Sounds like you've got a lot of investigation to do when you get back there.
Yeah, well, I'm back out there in September. I normally go either July or August, but we're going September this year because we're doing a week down there and then shooting up to visit friends in near Venice.
Oh, nice.
For a week up there. And Venice.
Another nice area, of course. Venice has got a ton of activity going on there, you can steal yourself away.
That's it, yeah. Absolutely.
Well, let's face it, Europe, with civilization going back thousands of years, you would expect some kind of activity in most places out there. At the same time, you brought up a very good point, Brian, about these geothermic areas and these faults where earthquakes are, and there is a correlation with it it seems, in a lot of paranormal cases. But what that correlation is, we're still not 100% sure. You mentioned having poltergeist activity in Iceland, and yet Iceland also has a lot of stories about the Icelandic elves, and they take those stories so seriously that they even divert highways around their habitat to keep from pissing them off. Movie companies, because Iceland is such a really popular place to film movies and television shows, that production companies learned early on that they have to do certain rituals to quote-unquote appease the elves before they shoot, in order to have a smooth shoot. Otherwise, they'll have camera equipment failures, electrical failures, accidents, all sorts of things seem to happen.
That's exactly right. And I was on a shoot, not in Iceland, but was on a shoot in the north of England, funny enough, it was a horror movie of all things, and we were warned that the woods were haunted, and there were the little people lived in certain parts of the woods, and not to piss them off, basically. And guess what? They pissed them off, and we encountered a ton of activity until they were appeased. Cars, brand new cars that were working perfectly well would suddenly stop. There was a Rolls-Royce Cinequip generator to power the lights at night, which mysteriously just did not work all of a sudden, and then after a lot of coaxing, eventually worked again. I was walking down a pathway back to the old scout hut area where was that was our base camp with a pal, and there's only the two of us. The lights were off at the base camp because there'd been no one there for quite a few hours since before it went dark, and we watched the lights come on, and we knew there was no one there. When we got to the huts, we could look in, there was no one there, but the lights had turned themselves on. It wasn't the case that the power had come on, the switches had been physically flipped.
Well,
so it's very weird.
And you wonder what causes that. Now, people, and this is where I like to debate people, at least talk about different possibilities. Whenever people encounter activity like that, most people automatically assume, oh, it's a ghost or it's a spirit. This place is haunted. When in truth, we have no evidence of that. And we're looking at, and I know in all the discussions Irene and I have had over the last few years, how we view the paranormal so much differently now, because there's a lot of other types of activity that we need to take into consideration. Everything from like what we were just talking about, these possible nature type of beings or spirits, whatever you want to call them, that might be attributed to it. There's also the idea of multiple realities, parallel universes, time slips. So much more comes into play, and if you stop to think about it, we think we're at the actual top of the heap, the peak of our scientific ability, and I feel that our so-called peak is like still in the Stone Age. There's so much we don't know and understand, especially science's stance where they will only accept something if they can see it and measure it in a laboratory. And a lot of this phenomenon doesn't subscribe to those rules. It seems to be outside our idea of modern physics. So they don't want to look at it. But yet it seems, and in my personal experiences, the things I've experienced, there is something measurably going on. It's just not going to perform the way you want it to.
I wholeheartedly agree. In fact, this was the position I took in the book that I just published, because in my opinion, we shouldn't put a label on things automatically. In my opinion, these things they could be alien. We could be the aliens. Who knows? Our civilization hasn't been on Earth that long. Man's a relatively late comer in the cycle of this planet. But these things are alien to us, basically. So why should we automatically stick a label on, assume it's a ghost or a demon, whatever? We don't know what a ghost or a demon really is. So how can we label it as such? It just seems just ridiculous to do so. And no, I take the same position as you do there. Wholeheartedly agree.
Well, it's so much of what modern people, especially in Western cultures, base their beliefs off of a lot of it comes from Victorian era spiritualism, and those ideas of ghosts and spirits, and a lot more comes from older legends and folklore. Yet, we still don't know, because so much of it is guesswork. People don't know, so they're trying to put their own spin on what they think is happening when we really don't know for sure. But when we take the time to go to these locations, study the phenomenon that's going on, it starts to paint a picture. As long as you don't jump to conclusions, you'll start to notice just how damn strange the whole phenomenon is. And it's sometimes very hard to classify.
I agree. Have you ever seen a star cloth in a theater? One of those black cloths with like little specks of light, the LED lights or whatever they are, scattered around. I believe that what we're encountering with UFOs, with the whole spectrum of paranormal phenomena, I believe it's like a star cloth, and what we're only seeing are these little specks. And to the viewer in the auditorium, those lights are not really connected. But when you start to peel the cloth back, you see all the links and cross-links that connect all these things. I believe a lot of these things are interconnected in some way or many ways that we as yet don't know. And you're right, we're in our infancy. Scientifically, we're Muppets. We think we're smart. It's arrogance that makes us believe we're right at the top of the tree, but we're not. And let's face it, we already know that time isn't linear.
No,
we assume that we have to be at the cutting edge. We have to be right there at the forefront of time. Well, if time's non-linear and the past, present, and future exist all at the same time, well, what's in front of us? It's arrogance that doesn't want to allow us to believe that there is anything more advanced than ourselves. It's weird. I think mankind has a lot to learn.
Well, especially when you look at, and this kind of gets a little bit away from the paranormal, I won't spend much time on it, but when you look at our past and, history as we think we understand it today is so filtered and edited and sanitized and packaged and submitted to people and say this is the truth. When you look at these ancient civilizations, these megalithic structures, even like the pyramids of Egypt, the ruins down in Peru and Bolivia, that were built using technology we can't replicate. It's Absolutely. More advanced than what we have, and some of these things were built at least 12,000 years ago, before the first civilizations are said to have flourished. And yet they make excuses. Oh, the Aztecs built these, or, the Egyptians had millions of slaves to build these. And it's like impossible. And so something was going on.
The infrastructure wasn't there for millions like that. It's just ridiculous. And, you might as well say, well, let's use the same tools now. They can do a darn better job, because let's face it, the ancients did a better job of making things last than we do.
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes you would have to think, what is the purpose to use such massive blocks of stone that, unfortunately, that is going to stand the test of time? They don't do that now. Buildings fall apart in a few years here. Concrete crumbles, steel girders, don't support weight. And yet these old stone structures are lasting for thousands of years, sometimes tens of thousands of years.
Look at the tolerances between those huge blocks, those perfectly shaped blocks. The tolerances, you can't slide a piece of paper between the blocks. They're that finely cut. Yeah, they want you to believe that was done with bronze tools or copper tools or wood or stone. Or really?
There's a gentleman we've had on the show before. I follow a lot. I'm really impressed with his work, Brian Forrester. And he has a company called Hidden Inca Tours. And he lives down in South America, but he's visited all these places around the world and in Europe and in Egypt and England and these Neolithic sites. And, he's found evidence for not only this tooling, but this insane precision that we can't replicate today, where blocks fitting together with no mortar, holes being dug in stone blocks that could only been etched with a laser, or that type of technology that we're familiar with. So, not to kind of get away from that, let's turn this back to the paranormal, because that's what we're mostly talking about tonight. These types of phenomena that people are experiencing isn't very much different. It's the strange and unknown, and they all have explanations. We just don't know it, or we haven't developed enough to figure it out.
Exactly right. People say it's the unexplained. There's nothing unexplained. It just awaits explanation.
And there are also times, I think, in the past, my dog's having to smell something outside. In the past, I think we've had a lot more answers than we do nowadays. I think we have a lot of forgotten knowledge. And in that forgotten knowledge can sound like magic to people who don't know any better now. Or to people who came later and didn't have that technology, and so they think that something sounds like a fairy tale or it's magic, and when in reality it's another form of science.
Well, let's not forget that in the ancient times, people could only write and describe things with common frames of reference that they could understand. Now then, if they aren't very well versed in modern science or high-tech science, their frames of reference will be with the magical, the mystical. That's the only way that they can describe and write things. They can write about the fiery chariot, but they can't say, well, it took off like a jet plane with an afterburner, because they have no frame of reference for that.
Well, I mean,
so when they witness phenomena centuries, thousands of years ago, they have to write in their frame of reference, and that's why I think it really appears odd to a lot of people today, and I think people today dismiss things too readily because of sheer arrogance. We're the top of the tree, that's that, we know everything, and they knew nothing. They were stupid hundreds and thousands of years ago.
Exactly. And, even with modern day looking at some of this phenomenon that people deal with, ghosts and spirits. And as we've talked about many times on this show, and Irene and her experiences with encountering things that seem to be more of some kind of shift in consciousness, a shift in time, a time slip or a dimension shift that people experience, especially people who are a little more sensitive than others. And people could mistake that for ghosts or spirits or those types of phenomena.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, or do you say time shifts? I mean, do you remember the sighting of the Roman soldiers in the counting house? I think it was in York. You must remember that, Irene.
Yeah, I remember.
By Harry Martindale, and I think it was in 1953 or something. And that sounds to me more like it's either stone tape theory or a time shift, because he describes soldiers right down to the leather scabbard for the sword and the type of sword.
Yeah, didn't he say that he couldn't see their feet or something?
Yes, they were marching at knee height on the floor, but the original Roman road was about 2 or 3 feet below, so it would have been absolutely right for the original road, like a time slip viewing. And interestingly enough, if you actually read the report on Harry Martindale, he was making a great disturbance to the stone construction of the building at the time. He was a plumber. He was trying to knock a hole through, and he was causing a great deal of disturbance. So maybe the phenomena of disturbing, and it was limestone. Limestone is one of those very paranormally conducive rocks that can maybe hold material or has a way to sort of activate time portals. I don't know, but maybe there's some connection there with disturbances.
Yeah, it could well be. Well, that was a very interesting one, though. That really was a fantastic one. I would love to have seen that.
And there's still no explanation.
No.
And it's been. I think other people have witnessed it since then, and have documented it, and they all see pretty much the same sort of thing.
Yeah, and he refused to go back there and work, didn't he?
He did, I believe, and
scared him.
He was one of your traditional tradespeople. He was not the sort of guy that was just going to come in. I mean, at the time, don't forget, in the 50s, publicity seeking wasn't really the done thing for anybody. And people wanted to keep out of the papers.
Well, this is it. People didn't really talk about this sort of thing.
No.
It wasn't, not like today. Everybody's into the paranormal, so it seems. This is where we get to your book in a moment. But everybody seems to be into the paranormal. They watch the programs on the television. They think they can do it, and that's it. But in those days, no, you didn't talk about this sort of thing. If you saw something, you said anything to your parents or, your imagination. Your imagination. That's all you got. You
get labelled as the village loony, don't you? I mean, okay. I mean, people look at me occasionally and go, "You do what?" Yeah, I do professional paranormal investigation. Oh, that's a bit unusual. So yeah, but I'm actually a scientist in my real job, and really, okay, they just don't make the connection.
Yeah.
Never underestimate.
Better to say that.
One of my favorite phrases in dealing with this type of phenomenon is never underestimate the power of denial.
Oh, you're not kidding there.
Yeah. Because when people don't want to hear it, they don't want to hear it. If it challenges their belief system, and I know my belief system has changed 3 or 4 times completely in my lifetime. And, and I've tried to I look at everything when I do an investigation or I'm looking into a phenomenon or something interests me, I try to keep that open mind because occasionally I'll hear something and I can't accept it. I go, nope, that can't be. No, that's just ridiculous. And then over time, I'll slowly start to look at it and realize that the evidence is there, and I'll start to look at a phenomenon in a completely different light.
I think everyone does. All scientists, we're all as bad as each other to begin in a way. Because let's face it, how many scientists have said, paranormal investigation, you can't prove it, you can't do it, repeat it in a laboratory. Well, hang on. My argument there is you can't repeat anthropology in a laboratory, you can't repeat geology in a laboratory, but those are still accepted branches of science. There are several other areas of accepted science you can't repeat in a laboratory. Yet they're still accepted. So there's some kind of double standard going on here.
Oh, absolutely. It's just, again, another way of trying to deny something that they just don't want to accept. It threatens their paradigm. It threatens the stability of their universe. And it just, so they'd rather deny it than accept it.
That's exactly right. You've got to start answering too many awkward questions then that you don't have the answers for.
Now with your book, and the book itself is, again, called Paranormal Investigation, the Black Book of Scientific Ghost Hunting and How to Investigate Paranormal Phenomenon. Now, in this book, do you include any case studies of locations that you've looked into? I
do. I very much take it from what are best practices. This is where I was going with it, and it started to come from there because I was originally writing my other book first about the haunting of Lilford Hall, and then it struck me that, hang on, let's get this best practice thing out of the way first and get this sort of it's my personal take on how I was trained as a sports scientist to sort of form a question hypothesis chain and investigate things accordingly. And so, yeah, we sort of cover anecdotes. I cover several of the incidents. As I mentioned Lilford Hall earlier, I touch upon that. That's mentioned in there, though that will become a complete, probably a very thick book of its own. But Lilford Hall was interesting because we arrived there with 7 crew from the United States and There were 6 people from the United Kingdom came together at this one place in Northamptonshire in November of 2012. And on the very first night, we were ready to bed down for the night. We were essentially camping.
I was going to say, are you sleeping on the floor?
Oh, no, we had camp beds. We were camping in this wonderful place until we could arrange some of the rooms in a better order. And eventually we got rooms, and it was nice. We had rooms, and we had kind of camp beds in rooms, and it worked quite well in the end. But it's still just a very, very old, and parts of it were completely derelict. Other parts were less derelict. So anyway, we decided to close every door and window in the place because we decided it was colder inside the building than it was outside the building. So we thought, well, we don't want any extra drafts and November winds coming through, and it was quite frosty. Thought, no, we'll seal it up. Then we'll go to the pub, have a sort of early dinner, bed down for the night, start shooting the next day, kind of early, and get stuck in.
You had your priorities right then. Pub first.
Oh yeah, go to the pub. But hasten to add, on shoots we don't partake. There's a strict rule we have. You know, you can have your fun afterwards on the end of production party, but But during production, no. Anyway, we got back that night, and this is after we painstakingly, as a group, stayed together because it's very easy to get lost in this place. Yeah. We'd stayed together. We closed every door and window, and we bolted all the doors. And it had taken us about 20 minutes to walk through the entire building and come back down to the old kitchen area where we started before we exited the building. So we knew everything was locked. Mm-hmm. When we got back, every door was open.
No.
Every door, I kid you not. And all of us were jaw dropped. We go, what the heck? We immediately thought, we didn't think paranormal activity. We thought, hang on, have we got any visitors? Have we got any derelicts staying here?
You thought somebody was going along behind you, reopening the doors, yeah?
Well, we thought there was someone. It was such a big place, we thought we could easily have someone in the building, unbeknownst to us, that was also staying there without authority. So we thought, okay, we're going to do this again methodically. We're also going to search every room and sweep this properly and lock it down. And we did do. And by the time we'd gone round again, it must have taken about 45 minutes that time, because we did a thorough sweep and a thorough search. And when we got back down to the base door again, it started in the lower kitchen area in the north wing. Guess what? That door was open again.
Oh, do you know what I would have done? I would have stood by one of those locked doors and just waited.
Actually, with hindsight, that would have probably been a good idea. Anyway, it all started from there. During the course of the first shoot, we had debris thrown at us. Workmen who were working there reported that they would have debris thrown at them from nowhere on a regular basis in some of the rooms. One of the doors was ripped off. The actual, not just the door and frame was ripped off next to an old kitchen area where we were congregated, and we didn't hear a darn thing. And it was literally wrenched off.
Do you think that it is actually a haunting, or do you think it's something else?
Do you know, even though this is a paranormal show and we're paranormal investigators, I hate to be put on the spot and say it's haunted. There's a phenomena taking place there, or phenomenon, and I don't know what it is. I don't want to put a finger on it and say, it could be haunted. It could be, but it's some kind of activity. It's some kind of energy activity that appears to be.
This is what I'm thinking as you're talking about it. You see.
I don't know what it is. The other thing that was interesting there is that in the 1700s, up to the 1700s, there was a village complete with a church on what is now the front part of the house, on the lawn. And it's a vast lawn, it's a huge lawn, it's beautiful. Anyway, the owners in the 1700s, they decided it was blocking their view, so they decided to move the village and the church. But they, just as in the Poltergeist movie, they moved the church and the headstones, but they didn't move the graves. There are apparently 2,000 bodies or more under the lawn of Lilford Hall on deconsecrated ground that remain there to this day.
Oh my God. Oh God.
And we try and wait for this. There's a drainage ditch that runs diagonally across the lawn that was built in Victorian times. And we tried to get down there, didn't we? And of course, there was a spike in activity as a result.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
When did this all happen then, Brian?
This started in 2012. Started in November 2012, and I stayed there for a total of 10 months. And I even though I can document the experiences and encounters and the phenomena, I can't totally explain. I can suggest explanations. I can document it and describe it. And I'd like to go back again, and I've been promised exclusive access to go back when I'm ready with a sufficient sized scientific team.
Oh, take me.
There we go. We've got volunteers coming now. Yeah, we'll sign you up, Irene. We should get Mark over as well on that one. That would be interesting.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'd love to investigate that. I really would. Again,
I'm sorry, going back to the book again, I mentioned that in the book. I also mentioned, well, actually, I was, I don't know if you've heard of the Redwood Falls UFO incident of 2017.
Redwood Falls, is this obviously in America?
It's in Minnesota. And
have you heard of that, Mark?
No, I haven't heard of this one.
No. Okay, if you actually check with the Mutual UFO Network, they reckon it was quite a significant incident that took place then, and I was I was the one that spotted it first, or spotted the first of the three lights, and I'll tell you why it was so significant. And this is also in the book, and it's not been written about before. I got a call from a pal of mine who's another author over there. He's a Brit who lives in Minnesota called Adrian Lee, and he said, "Look," he said, "what are you doing on Saturday night?" I said, "Well, not a lot." He said, "Fantastic." He said, "I've got permission from the museum in Redwood Falls to take the axe from the 1917 axe murders out to the cemetery where the victims are buried, and also where they found the alleged perpetrator of the crime, his grave. And we can try and use that as a trigger object and see what we can find." So there I am on Saturday night with my wife Helen, and it's the 1st of July 2017, and we're in a cemetery. I'm holding the axe of a mass murder on the 100th anniversary night of the axe murder. I'm thinking, well, this doesn't happen every day, so this is kind of fun. Interestingly, we had two people there from who were government workers, and they were accompanying us. Anyway, everything was going fine. Adrian was getting some splendid results on the voice box and the ghost box, and we're getting some interesting information. In fact, information that suggests that the alleged perpetrator wasn't the perpetrator at all. Anyway, that's being investigated subsequently, but one of the government workers said to us, "Look, can we go to the southern part of the cemetery and go to where the victims are buried?" So we did. We decamped there, and we went to the southern part of the cemetery. And I should say that the night was a beautiful, clear Minnesota summer night. You could see for miles. There was low humidity. It was a beautiful, clear night. No wind. It was a lovely evening. There was a moon, but it was way behind us, and it was a very clear night too. So we laid out all the equipment. We got mel meters. We got thermal imaging cameras. We got night vision video cameras.
And you've still got the axe, yeah.
You name it, we've got it. And I've still got the axe. In fact, I've given Helen the axe by this time. Let her deal with that one. I thought, oh, you know what, I'm not carrying this around any longer. Anyway, we were in that location, and it all started when one of the government workers said to me, "Which direction is south?" So I picked up a compass. I said, "Oh, I'll give you an exact bearing." And this is the point I felt like Jack Sparrow in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, because the compass was magnetized, and it was stuck on a northern. No matter what it did, it stayed on the letter N, and it just wouldn't move. And it was no matter what it did, I could hit it, thump it, shake it around. It was magnetized. I thought that was strange. So I said, "Okay, let me just check with the GPS. I'll give you an exact bearing." The GPS had failed. So I said, look, okay, I'll tell you, I've got some flight training. There's a flight path here, there's a flight path there, and if you look about 2 or 3 miles behind us, actually probably more than that, 45 miles behind us, you can see the flight path into Minneapolis St. Paul Airport. Oh, yeah, she said, I get that now. So, and we then start the investigation, and Adrian leads on with the first few questions, and at that point, I look over his shoulder behind him, and about two miles away, at about 10,000 feet, doing about 300 knots on a west to east trajectory, horizontal trajectory, there is a huge ball of light, silent, and it's traveling along, and it's a red one. I can remember the first one, and it stopped at a certain point. It vectored down, stopped, vectored again, stopped, and then headed off east-northeast. Now, at this point, during the whole encounter, we're getting readings on the EMF, we're getting millimeter readings, we're getting data. Because by chance, we deployed all the paranormal investigation equipment at the grave.
Yeah.
So we didn't expect the encounter, but we were prepared for something completely different. But even though we were getting readings, and we were just flabbergasted. The investigation then paled into significance. It was almost a case of, well, look, you've been dead 100 years, you're going nowhere, we'll be back in a bit. So we're making our notes, and we're jotting, comparing notes, and all of a sudden then, there's an orange light doing exactly the same thing on exactly the same flight path at exactly the same height and distance. And from what we could see, exactly the same speed.
Yeah.
Did exactly the same maneuvers. It stopped, vectored, and eventually headed off east-northeast. And we were, again, jaw dropped. We're getting more data. We're logging details. It was actually my pal Adrian said, wouldn't it be funny if another one came in and it was exactly 5 minutes apart. Wouldn't it be funny if another one came in 5 minutes? So we waited. And lo and behold, a yellow one came. And I said, oh my God, look, it's yellow. And at that point, the Ovulus said yellow. And that did exactly the same thing.
So
we were interviewed separately by the authorities, and our stories naturally concurred, and we were pretty much grilled over it. And so far, there's been no explanation. But I've made it public for the first time in that book, and I have no explanation for it, and I've no idea why it should happen in the middle of a paranormal investigation in a cemetery where an axe murder's victims were located. But that's what we encountered.
Well, one being red, orange, and a yellow one. It couldn't be because they were sort of... the red one was closer, and the orange one was slightly a bit further over, and the yellow one was a bit further over than that. So the actual colour... I don't know what I'm talking about.
I think what you're trying to...
appeared to be the same distance, about the same height, same distance. Yeah. It was just weird.
Mm. What were you going to say?
I think having equipment deployed is unusual prior to an incident.
Yeah, I think what you're trying to describe is a Doppler effect, Irene, but it really doesn't work with light, especially, when we're dealing with light here for objects close up, because, travels at the speed of light. It's not like sound where a train going by will be higher pitched, and then as it passes you, becomes lower pitched because sound travels a lot slower. But I kind of understand where you're going with that concept. I've seen these strange lights here once, just a few months back, where I saw a string of about 15 to 20 reddish orange lights traveling in formation, flying past me. And I still, to this, I know airplanes. I know what craft flies around here. I know what things look like, and I couldn't identify these. Still not ready to call them quote unquote UFOs, only in that they were unidentified. I had no idea what they were, but it's still very, very strange. I keep feeling like there's an explanation for it. I'm not quite ready to call it like I had a paranormal encounter. It was just the way.
I'm with you on that, Mark.
Yeah, it's just the way it felt. Like, I'm not ready to jump on that bandwagon just yet.
No, and like you, I couldn't call these UFOs because people said, "Well, were they UFOs?" I said, "Well, yes, they were unidentified, but frankly, we don't know.
Yeah.
No.
Yep.
So on that particular night, then you didn't get anything from the victims of the axe murder.
Actually, we did get a little bit, but we decided to decamp shortly after that because we'd burned a lot of time. We were actually disturbed.
Yeah.
Have you ever had these experiences where you feel uneasy and you feel something's really touched your soul, and it's like almost been like it's just disturbing at a very base level. So we decamped and went back to the Redwood Falls Museum, to the jail cell where the condemned prisoners used to stay before they were executed. And we got some very interesting readings in there and very interesting video. We got, in fact, there was faces over being picked up on the facial recognition camera over my shoulder, but we were all still so stunned from the other event that this was kind of like, oh, it's just a face over my shoulder. It was kind of, okay. That's how deeply disturbed we were.
You say Helen is your wife, yes?
Yes, she is.
Is she the lovely lady I spoke to this afternoon?
Yes, you did, and yes, but she's an ardent paranormal investigator too. I was very lucky when we met that she has this interest. And
yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Does she go on many of these with you?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, she has this uncanny sixth sense. She has a sensitivity which she needs to develop, and I'm encouraging her to do so because, for example, we were driving along. We have written about this in the book. We were driving along one day, and we're driving past a friend's house, and she says, "Oh my God!" She says, "I can see police cars outside this house."
Yeah.
And there's a lot of them flashing lights everywhere. Within half an hour of us arriving at our destination, I should say, we get a call. Oh, have you heard such and such a person who was this person who lived there? Her husband's had a massive heart attack, and there's police and ambulances outside, and it's filling the road. And so she'd had a precognition, if you like. And so she gets this a lot. In fact, we investigated the Terrace Mill in northern Minnesota, which is a beautiful old water mill. And before we went, she said, "Look, I'm going to write this down before we go," because she had a precognition about someone who had not died there, but had got one particular hand badly hurt in some piece of machinery there. And lo and behold, at the very end of the investigation, when we're closing up for the night about 3 o'clock in the morning, and the guide that's taken the trouble to stay on late says, "I should tell you a little bit about the mill." Lo and behold, one of the owners who was selling it to another person, that person got their hand trapped in this piece of machinery that Helen had predicted, and so she's very sensitive like that.
Yeah, we should have had her on the show as well.
Next time we'll get her on.
Next time.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Now, Brian, a question for you in regards to different locations you've investigated around the UK. And I know we're talking about some really offhand, strange phenomenon, but one location that has me intrigued, I've never been there, and I don't think it's ever been fully investigated, is right near Irene in Wales. She took a trip there, what was it, about 2 years ago, Irene? To Llanstefan Castle?
Well, I go there quite often, but yeah, this particular time it was about 2 years ago.
Yeah. And
Llanstefan.
And took a series of photos that she was just there with her family enjoying the day, and took a series of photos that showed all sorts of paranormal activity.
Yeah, the photographs were the kids playing and one thing and another, just normal family snapshots. And there was a hell of a lot of paranormal activity in the photographs.
What did you see? Did you see orbs and things like this?
No. I was just snapping photographs of the family.
No, instead of
it was
orbs,
a bright, sunny day.
Yeah, instead of orbs, she was getting full-blown apparitions.
Full-blown apparitions?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. She took a picture of her son looking out this window, and when we looked at the photo, there's a woman standing directly in front of him that wasn't there. Another one where she took a picture of this one battlement that the public doesn't have access to. And in the window, you could see some. In the doorway, you could see something. When you zoom in, it looks like an old soldier back from like 1500s, maybe.
It's a tower.
Yeah.
It's a tower, but the top floor of the tower is no longer there. So even if you went in there, you couldn't get up there. Although the windows are up there and one thing or another, the floors are gone.
Were you the one that was taking the pictures, Irene?
Yeah, I was just taking photographs. It was a family day out. We were up there with the kids. Clonstefan is a castle that overlooks the estuary. The very end of the estuary that comes out into the sea. So it's a beautiful place to be. Clonstefan Castle. It's
You've got to investigate the place. Maybe have you thought this, that you captured the activity on camera?
During the day
it was
as well.
presenting itself to you because you are a sensitive, aren't you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Maybe do you think that? What do you think? I sometimes I wonder if these things appear in the same way, even on film or on digital, whatever you want to call it, to people who are more sensitive, they more readily appear.
It's as if they sense that you.
They sense that you, and that therefore, because many other people will take a picture and get nothing, but as a sensitive, you get something. So maybe there's this connection that we have. I'm not a sensitive. I shouldn't say that, but that you guys who are sensitive have, and that you can tune in.
Yeah, maybe.
Because don't forget, there's some interesting research that's been done just recently. This is what I touch on in the book, actually quite a bit in the book, because where science meets the paranormal, as I put it.
Yeah.
There's two, I think, very significant areas of science that have sort of recently come together with the paranormal. And one is the discovery of the low-level telepathic field that interlinks human beings. And they've now discovered this. They're able to measure it. It's like a human internet that we have. And this is now paving the way. It's how they now believe that it's possible for some people to mind read and have these sixth sense abilities. So it leads straight into the Akashic record question, of course. I mean, there's so many questions that it spring forth from this.
Well, it sounds like you've just described me.
It's this sort of thing, isn't it, that you can tune in. And the other thing that I think is very interesting just recently, I think it's got a huge ramification for paranormal investigation and for things like demonic possession, if you want to use the term demon, but possession or multiple personalities or what have you, attachments. Mm-hmm. And they've discovered that we do not think our thoughts. Scientists have discovered that we become aware of our thoughts, and we become aware of them from a much older part of the brain that they can't quite figure out. And it's like, I use the analogy in my book that you wouldn't expect to find the driver of a car in the engine, would you?
No.
So why do we expect to find the soul of the person in the brain? It's the same sort of thing. But that begs a lot of questions. And one of the questions that I put forward straight away is, if we have this human body, like a car, this human machine, and the brain's like the engine that can tell us how fast to run or what to do and things like this and which way to turn, there's a control cabin, which is like this older part of the brain where, and I'll use inverted commas here, the spirit or the entity or the energy that is us, the person, sits like the driver of a car in the control cabin of a car with a wheel. Well, that sort of makes sense. There's a logic within that, whether I'm right or wrong or close or whatever. There's a sort of logic there. But it also begs another question. What happens if another more powerful entity gets into that control cabin and hijacks the car? It's like you being hijacked at the traffic lights when you stop your car a guy jumps in with a gun, and next thing you know, you've got what we classify as a demon in control of a human being. Is this how the process actually takes place? Has science actually now discovered the first steps in the links of a chain?
So this entity enters the body, and then your own soul, your own being, steps back and allows it to take control.
Maybe it's got
like
no choice.
A trance medium.
Yeah, maybe it's got no choice, because if we're only becoming aware of our thoughts from the older part of the brain, if what's on that older part of the brain has something else that attaches to it or comes in that's more powerful, this
is a similar thing to what trance mediums do. You know, they allow the entity to enter them, and then they actually kind of stand back in the body and allow.
That's under a controlled situation. They allow the entity into the car as a passenger, and they allow it to take control of the wheel for a short time before taking the wheel back.
So these people that get possessed and one thing or another, you know, subconsciously they're also allowing this same sort of procedure to happen because they're either depressed, or they're under stress, or they're drunk or something like that.
Whatever, yeah. I mean, let's face it,
they're not got full control over their own being. Interesting.
And we've all heard of people on investigations getting attachments. Maybe this is how attachments take place.
Oh, yeah.
Well, something gets in the back seat of the car and then eventually comes forward and starts to meddle around with the controls. And this is one of the items I touched on quite extensively in the book, because it fascinates me, because I love the areas where science starts to take the first baby steps in explaining some of these paranormal phenomena. And people aren't quite making the links yet on the scientific side. They're sort of like alluding to it because they don't want to say outright, this has ramifications within the paranormal world. Well, let's face it, it has ramifications in the religious world, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because it might be the first step in discovering what the soul is, or where the soul is located, or maybe the soul's in a completely different dimension, and this whole part of the brain is an interface between dimensions.
This is something that me and Mark have been talking about for the last year or so, Mark, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. It's we've been getting some really deep conversations on what is the nature of the soul, the mind, where does the mind come into it? And even some of these other types of phenomenon or dimensions and how they interact with us. We're talking about these ghosts and spirits, but yet there's other types of paranormal phenomenon that just really leaves you scratching your head. And the one that's coming to mind to me right now is, Irene, what happened to you when you were going to your cousin's funeral?
Yeah.
And again, we've told the story before. I'll keep it brief for our, listeners who've heard the story. But, Irene and her husband were leaving to catch a flight, and they were driving to Bristol, and they got lost on the way. It was 4:00 in the morning. Nobody's around. And then this older gentleman just kind of steps out of nowhere. So they pull over and ask him for directions. And he said, well, it's better if I show you. And he climbs in the car. And then proceeds for the next 20 minutes to give them directions on how to get where they're going. And then when they get there, he gets out and leaves, and then suddenly he's just gone.
Disappeared. Totally disappeared. But he came out of nowhere. We were in a country lane. There was no houses, nothing anywhere. And he's an elderly gentleman. In the middle of winter.
And
4:00 in the morning.
Yeah, and the fact that
in the middle of the countryside.
And the fact that both she and her husband described him completely differently, from the clothing he was wearing to one of them saw him wearing glasses, carrying a lantern. The other saw him with a backpack.
Not a lantern, torch.
A torch, excuse me. A torch, and
going back 100 years there.
Yeah, and there was just an amount of high strangeness, and that's the type of phenomenon that fascinates me the most. The high strangeness is the best way to describe it. Whether you're dealing with that kind of an experience, or maybe dealing with a very unusual creature like Mothman that people claim to see. And it just feels like it's completely otherworldly. It doesn't fit into our rational paradigm in any way.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I get where you're coming from there, and it makes me wonder straight away if these entities present themselves differently to everyone, because we each view it. Let's face it, there are certain commonalities with certain apparitions, certain that are seen in certain locations, but how many times have, for want of a better term, ghosts, spirits, or whatever, appeared slightly differently to different people for different reasons? We don't know the reasons, but why would this person appear differently to you, your husband, and your other passengers?
Well, this is it.
That was what they wanted to project.
I saw him with a dark jacket on. My husband saw him with a dark jacket on. I saw him with a light grey jacket on. My husband said he was well kept. His hair was nicely combed and everything. To me, he looked like he'd been dragged through a bush backwards. His hair was all over the place like Ken Dodd.
God, no, not Ken Dodd.
No, that's how different we saw this man.
Knowing Ken Dodd, that is very different.
But that's how different we saw this man.
Wow.
And we were, I was in the passenger seat, my husband was driving. This fella got in the back seat. This old man got in the back seat. And we both saw different people. We saw him differently. But
why do you think it presented itself so differently to you?
Got no idea. Unless it's what you expect to see, I don't know.
Well, I firmly believe, and this goes to a number of different types of experiences that you could sum up with either ghosts or spirits, to people who claim to have angelic experiences or very religious visions and experiences, near-death experiences where they encounter, Jesus, Saint Gerard, or, whoever, Buddha, in a near-death experience. I believe that these higher-level beings, entities, interdimensionals, whatever we want to call them, because they don't have physical form, they are able to present themselves in such a way that makes the most sense to the person experiencing them. And in order to better convey their message, or to help, or doing whatever it is that they're doing, there would be no reason for you and Brian, Irene, to see the different type, the person looking completely different, except maybe to reinforce the fact that it was an otherworldly experience. If you both described the same bloke, you'd be going, well, okay, that was a bit strange, but, it wasn't a big deal. But the fact that you both saw him differently now has us talking about it months later and really thinking hard about it. And maybe that was the intent.
But
I'm with Mark here on this one. I believe it's the way you wanted to perceive, that he wanted you to perceive them to best receive the information they were giving you.
Yeah. The strange thing about it was my husband saw him, because he's not like me. As far as he was concerned, there was a blood and bone man sitting there. But all the time he was sitting in the back of that car, I was on edge, and I felt that there was something different about him. I just knew that there was something not quite right.
Mm.
Yeah, but with Brian, he didn't click that way at all. Not until afterwards, and we started talking about it, and then I asked him what he actually saw, and he came out with a totally different description to what I saw. But if he hadn't been there, I wouldn't have got to my cousin's funeral in Glasgow. I was getting a plane up to Glasgow, We were lost in the countryside. We were all right all the time we were on the motorway. But as soon as we turned off the motorway to go to Bristol Airport, that's when we got lost.
Yeah, I get lost doing that too.
Mm.
It's not the easiest way to get around there.
We wouldn't have made that aeroplane. Definitely wouldn't have made it.
He had to appear. He had to help. As Mark said, it's some kind of maybe I hate to use the term angel, because we don't know what an angel is. Even we don't know what an entity, a helpful entity, a benevolent entity.
That's right. Yeah. And it's not the first time, this has happened several times to me, all this sort of thing.
But these things have been reported since time immemorial.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, people who see things, if you look at the different cultures around the world, and whether, you're reading religious writings or folk tales, mythology, the mythology is based in the culture that it comes from. And so obviously people in Western cultures, if they're a Christian, let's say they have a near-death experience and they see Jesus, or they see Saint Michael or somebody like that, because that is what they expect, or that is an image that can be presented to them that they would most accept, whatever that is, when in truth is, I think, whatever being or entity is presenting themselves is not that person, is not that vision.
Energy.
It's just pure energy, and yet it's doing this in a way just to make sure the message gets across. Look at the miracle at Fatima. What the children saw, what they always assumed was the Virgin Mary. Now, this female entity that appeared to them never said its name. Never said, yes, I am Mary, the mother of Jesus. It just was a woman that showed up and was giving them instructions and teachings and prophecies. And because they were a Catholic background, they automatically assumed it was the Virgin Mary.
But what if they actually are not there, but it's something that's just manipulating the mind? And if somebody else had been sitting in that car in the back seat, maybe another passenger might not have even seen this man. Might have wondered why we stopped.
Yep.
Perfectly possible. Don't forget, the only one of our senses that cannot be fooled is the sense of smell, because everything else passes through the hypothalamus, and that means that everything else is pre-interpreted.
But even then, what about those smells when you're doing an investigation, and let's say you get a rotten stench of meat, decaying meat, or sulfur, or you smell the rose of her perfume, and that's not there. What is?
See, I take that very seriously, because your olfactory senses cannot be fooled. That's going straight to the brain. That's straight pure data. It's not pre-interpreted. So that is real data. That is serious stuff. I think when you smell something, sit up and take note. There's something really going on there, chaps.
Oh yeah. That happens an awful lot in this house, because this house was built by a deacon of the chapel who was also a blacksmith. So occasionally I'll wake up to the strong smell of burning oil and metal right beside my bed, sort of thing. And I know in my mind's eye I can see him just standing there breathing over me and saying, as if to say, what are you doing in my bed? Right. And other times, there's a beautiful perfume smell out there, especially in the hallway. That
you don't know who's lived there. Your house is obviously very old, and you don't really know who's lived there and who's. I mean,
I know.
People, lay people think that, if you want to see a ghost, go to a graveyard. Well, let's face it. If you can return as a spirit, would you really want to hang around a graveyard, or would you want to go to somewhere you quite liked?
Well, a quick brief on this house. Right, this house was built by Herbert Morgan for his wife Annie. Back in the the Victorian days. He started building it in Victorian days, finished it in the early Edwardian days. But he built it because she fell in love with a house in the north of Wales, and she wanted him to move to the north of Wales with her and buy this house. So instead, because he didn't want to leave the village, he bought a piece of land from the farmer, and he built an exact replica of the house that she fell in love with. So the house was built out of love. And it is this family, Herbert and Annie, that are mainly in this house.
Fascinating.
Yeah. She died. She only managed to live in it for about 8 years, and then she died of tuberculosis, leaving a little 8-year-old girl.
But she obviously loved the place, so maybe her spirit or her entity wants to come back there. I mean, let's face it, maybe it's wandering, maybe it's lost. We don't know.
No, they're definitely here. They're definitely here. The day I came to view this house, and this house was empty, there wasn't a stick of furniture in it anywhere. I walked upstairs. I hadn't even got into the master bedroom. I was on the threshold across going in the door. And I looked over, there's a big bay window in there. I looked across and there was this Edwardian ladies at the window.
Wow.
So I just turned around and walked back out again. Went back downstairs.
And you thought it's the ideal place?
Yeah.
Sold.
Well, hey, I'll tell you, Brian, if you're actually looking for a place to investigate, look no further than Irene's house.
Yeah,
That sounds fascinating.
Because not only is she dealing with, her ghosts there, that valley she lives in is a UFO highway.
Yeah, it is.
And there's legend of the local Trey Moore living up in the nearby hills.
Of course. Have you ever thought of doing a live investigation on your show from the house?
The problem with that, we've thought about that. I've thought about that many times. The only problem with it is, let's face it, most investigations are as boring as whale excrement. And,
they are indeed, but you never know if you try and condense something.
Yeah, well, you could do a pre-recorded show and then try to do highlights. Yep. But even then, half the time when doing an investigation, you don't even know if you really caught anything until later, unless you're at a location that's just really off the hook. With
so I'm just thinking, this place sounds so active, you might get lucky.
Yeah, well. There's not a day goes by when something doesn't happen in this house. That's the way I put it, anyway.
Well,
it is very active.
Could be worth a thought for the future. You never know.
Well, I thought about putting cameras up here all over the house and just streaming the house for people to watch. But then I thought, nah. No privacy.
But you're right, it's UFO highway, isn't it, there as well?
Yeah, it is. A friend of mine, she laid, I don't know whether she'll be listening to this, Karen Pod. She was up in the back bedroom once and she laid there, it was early hours of the morning, and there was massive great windows in the back bedrooms, and she was laying in bed and she just looked out the window and she just watched these going across the sky.
Well, Brian, let me ask you, with the investigations you've done, what was one of the most intriguing or active investigations you've experienced?
Oh, I think the most active, well, it sounds boring to come back to Lilford, but Lilford was probably the most active in a condensed period of time that I've ever experienced. Because within the space of the first few days, we got furniture moving in a room that we know there was no furniture in. I mean, don't forget, there's 13 people, and that number might sound significant, but there's 13 people in total.
Yeah.
And we're all being plagued by all sorts of stuff. I mean, a butterfly manifested itself on the production manager's knee, and this is a hardcore guy, ex-military guy, who he just started crying when this happened. And we were all sat around in one of the ballrooms, the empty ballrooms. We'd got some camping chairs, and this was after we were trying to make sense of what we'd seen with the doors that wouldn't stay closed. And we, on another one of the tours, we've got a lot of this on video, and I present this at some of the conferences that I attend. And another one of the times we went round, a pencil materialized and threw itself right at the face of the person in front of us and just fell on the floor. And we all saw it. So that there's something quite, I don't say malevolent, but there's something very active about that place, and I can't understand why, because it doesn't appear to be on any fault lines, and I don't know why. Maybe it's just because it's so old. Maybe it's because of the graves that still lie on deconsecrated ground, and I don't know. But there's definitely something going on there.
Oh, that's nice, isn't it? You get pencils and butterflies. I get little stones thrown at me.
Oh no, we've had stones and debris as well, big pieces of rock.
Yeah.
So we have had that.
Yeah, I've had them drop out the ceiling. I've had them thrown at me in the hallway.
Is this at your house?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you'll get lucky there if you do an investigation, maybe do a seance there, or to find out what is going on.
I might find about 50 cigarette lighters and about 30 pairs of eyeglasses that have gone missing over the years.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I was doing an investigation in Poltergeist in Cornwall earlier this year, and this little guest house that calls in, it's a bar called the Old Mill House there, and they called us in simply because one of the maids wouldn't go and service some of the rooms now, because what had happened is she'd take towels in there, fold them up, put them on the foot of the bed. She'd come back in with more stuff and find the towels had been moved to the head of the bed.
Oh, yeah.
And it got to the point where other people had witnessed this, and they'd laid the towels out together, exited the room, come back in, the towels are moved. So we did this investigation, and actually we managed to channel on the ghost box and get some good rapport backwards and forwards with a seemingly sentient entity of whatever it was. But it actually said, and we've got this recorded, the maid is too fussy. And when we asked, oddly enough, how many entities are there, they said 50, and of course that freaked these people out like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah, well, I
don't know what's going on.
I always say behind every person stands 50 ghosts. Did you know that?
Yeah. You really don't. Yeah, you know what? You could well be right.
Yeah, it could be elementals. What we call it.
Yeah, in a place like that, it really could be, because it was very close to water, in a deep valley, little village. This place was probably 400 or 500 years old.
Yeah, that's exactly what this house is. It's called Glenamp, which means house by the stream, right? And I'm in a valley, and I've got an elemental that lives under my stairs, I tell you. And I always joke with everyone that he sits on top of the Hoover in there.
As long as he makes himself useful, that's good.
Yeah, little bugger.
But isn't it interesting that water and certain kinds of rock formation play a part in this? Because let's face it, water over certain kinds of rock carry a charge or generate a charge. So it's down to energy again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Certain rocks are more conductive or conducive to storing or emitting energy than others. Quartz, for example. Limestone certainly seems to be a common rock that is linked with paranormal activity, and certainly underground streams and water and stuff like that. Running water generates energy.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a bigger picture here, you see, that I'm trying to put together. It needs sort of a group of scientists sitting in a room with completely open minds, and that's a bit of an oxymoron for scientists, because most of these guys have got really closed minds. The guys that should not have closed minds have probably got the most closed ones of all.
Oh, absolutely.
You never find some that have got open minds, sit them in a room and try to objectively explain these things with an open mind and try and create links and cross-links to see where we go. I think we could, open up some really new avenues of exploration there.
Yeah, definitely.
I couldn't agree more. And yet, take into account the different types of phenomena. You're at a location where you can feel everything is energy. You were mentioning this before with water underground or stone or any type of force is a type of energy. There's so much natural energy, and we don't take it into account that a lot of this energy can produce an electromagnetic field. And we measure EMF when we're doing investigations, and a lot of people measure it, but yet I think they don't have a real good understanding of it. And just because you're getting a little spike on a meter doesn't mean that you're experiencing paranormal activity. There could be a dozen reasons what's causing that. That could be perfectly natural. Now, if you're getting it in time with certain types of paranormal activity, okay, fine, I could see that. But yet we're still unable to measure other activity, like say a cold spot. You can have a camera and somebody saying, "Oh, I feel a cold spot here," and there's not much going on yet.
You get hot spots as well,
hot spots, cold spots, or you just feel the energy in a room change. I mean, I did an investigation once here in New Jersey a few years back where this location the energy in this house was so intense that all of us in our team, and none of us were quote-unquote sensitives or psychics, could feel whenever the entity or the energy entered a room and when it left a room. And using walkie-talkies, we could track its movements throughout the house, throughout the entire investigation. We knew where it was going. We knew where it was. We knew when it left a room, and then somebody call up, yep, it's up here now. And following us all over the place. And yet that's it. Our bodies are telling us that. Not some gadget, not some high-tech device. No. Our bodies are telling us that, hey, there's something here.
Well, your body is the most, what's the word? Accurate.
It's a sensitive, accurate. It's a biological measuring machine, isn't it? It takes data in, it translates that data into temperature, atmospheric pressure, moisture, and our brain interprets that.
That's right.
We've got sensors all over our body, haven't we?
That's it. You know, you've got that gut feeling as well.
And yet
let's face it, energy, everything that is around each of us now, it looks very solid, but the biggest part of what is actually there when you come down to an atomic level and a subatomic level is just space, empty space. And it's held together by energy. Yeah. And let's face it, if energy entities can manipulate energy, this is why we can get things materializing, dematerializing, passing through things.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It all suddenly makes a lot of sense when you actually boil it back down to particle physics level.
Oh, absolutely amazing when you think about it.
And that's
it's mind-blowing.
And, that's part of it, too. I mean, even physics right now, astrophysics, they talk about dark matter. They don't know what it is. They can't even prove it exists, except there's evidence that suggests that there is something there, that the matter in the universe that affects us, we can't see it, we can't measure it, but yet we see the effects it's having, so we know it's there. We call it dark matter, and there's even dark energy, and yet we still don't know what it is, because we have no way of measuring it.
No.
And yet,
the latest report I read actually only a couple of days ago was that, and I can't remember the university observatory, but they've now figured out that, or they think they've figured out where like 2/3 of the missing matter in the universe is, and it's in the space between galaxies because they've got evidence of this now. But they don't know what it is still. There's still no real clue. It's just evidence of something between the galaxies. So we're in our infancy. We've got so much to learn. It's a disgrace, really.
Actually, I think it's hiding under God's couch cushion, right next to the spare change.
You never know, do you? But it's interesting, isn't it, the way people see good and evil. My view on good and evil is that it's like the yin and yang symbol in the martial arts. You've got the black and white interaction. Yeah. I believe that there is a constant interaction of good and evil. One is not stronger than the other. One is not weaker than the other. It's just constant interaction. One gets stronger a little bit. The other gives ground, and vice versa. That the universe and all energy around us, in paranormal terms, is in this ever-changing shape of positive and negative energy.
Well, and that's also open to interpretation, too. And let's face it, humans are really quick to point out, oh, this act is evil, that is evil. But if you look at the natural world, in the animal kingdom, there is no good and evil. There just is. I'm sure the gazelle would think the lion is evil for eating it, but it's doing what it was made to do, and it is doing to survive. It raises its young. It has emotions. They love their young. They nurture them. There's all sorts of positive aspects to that lion who's going to eat that gazelle. But from the gazelle's point of view, the lion is evil. And the same, I think, can be said for certain types of activity that people experience. I mean, you would look at it as being evil in what it's doing to you or things that you experience, but maybe it's just doing what it does and we're interpreting it
nature.
As evil.
That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah, survival and nature, yeah.
It's the nature of just what it is. It's like a radioactive element that by its very nature can either have no harm, do no harm to a substance, or to animal tissue it can do a great deal of harm. It's just the nature, it just is.
Yeah.
Is the tick evil for attaching itself to you and sucking your blood? You know, you're getting no benefit from it. It is. It's a parasite. And yet, it's not evil. It's doing what it's going to do. You know, we've talked before on theories on some types of what people consider a negative.
Well, these entities that are parasites. Yeah.
Yeah. These so-called evil entities or negative entities. Well, let's say you have a negative entity or an entity that feeds and gains nourishment or strength off of negative emotions. So what does it do? It goes in a location and stirs up negative emotions in people and causes issues to feed off of. Is it evil? No, not necessarily. It's doing what it has to do in order to survive, just like every other creature. We're being on the receiving end of it. We could perceive it as evil. But in actuality, it's doing what it does as it was created.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep. So, you know, when Irene and I are sitting there taking the piss out of each other, you know, that's just how we were created, you know, that natural yin and yang going there.
It's nothing evil. It's just what you do.
Exactly.
That's it, yeah. I don't know. He's evil.
Well, you have the evil ring.
Yes, I do have the ring, which also came from the area of Pompeii.
Oh.
Yes, I got a ring. That we're studying. We're studying him.
You're definitely going to have to take some equipment back there.
Yeah. Yeah, I will.
I'd love to.
But it have to be light because I take a lot of baggage when I go. My suitcase.
Well, the problem I find with European flights, internal flights in Europe, is that they weigh your hand baggage and everything. I mean, I'm used to the flights in the United States where they just don't give a damn. You just take your hand baggage on and just stow it there. But in Europe, they're so anal. They weigh your bag. There's half an ounce too heavy. You better strip it down. Are you kidding me? Just get a life.
Yeah, and I know you've got to be safe over here and everything, but sometimes they go over the top. Do you know, my son bought a bottle of limoncello, right, in Amalfi, never opened it up, carried it through to the airport. Because it wasn't in his suitcase, they took it off him and threw it in the bin.
Oh, I bet they got that out after he'd gone.
And I bet it did.
Bet they were doing some dumpster diving there. No, they were fighting each other off to get in that bin.
Yeah, but the point is, if he'd bought the limoncello airside, he could have carried it on the plane in his hand.
Absolutely.
But because it was bought outside the airport.
You're not paying airport prices, you see. You've got to pay the airport prices. That'll do,
That's
you see,
it.
then you pass.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like going to the movie theaters and you can't bring in your own food and they charge you $10 for popcorn that costs 50 cents to make.
Oh,
I know,
yeah.
it's ridiculous,
I
isn't it?
used to smuggle mine in. Same in the pubs. Used to smuggle the bottle in the handbag.
Oh, I used to see that in my student days. Yeah, everyone used to do that. You used to have the bottle of vodka or a bottle of rum there in the bag. And,
Yeah.
Well,
how did we get onto this?
I don't know, but we have actually come to the end of the show. So, Brian, where your book is called Paranormal Investigation, the Black Book of Scientific Ghost Hunting and How to Investigate Paranormal Phenomenon. And where can people find that book?
It's on Amazon, which is quite convenient for practically everybody, really.
So it's on all the Amazons, actually.
Amazon.com, Amazon.co.uk.
.com.
Pick it up now.
And I think France and all over.
Now, do you ever... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Pretty much everywhere, I think.
Now, do you ever do any speaking engagements, or is there anywhere that people can find you or get in touch with you?
I do, actually. In fact, on the 1st of September, I'm appearing at the Manchester Conference Centre on the Seriously Strange North event, and I'm speaking about showing some pictures from the UFO encounter there. On the 10th of November, I'm appearing at Bodmin Jail, speaking there and performing an investigation. And on some others, the date escapes me, not October, November when I'm in Minneapolis. Back in Minneapolis for MarsCon in spring of next year, and then the St. Louis, Missouri Star Trek convention just after that too. So quite a few coming up, really.
Oh, fantastic!
Well, you're going to be busy.
Yeah.
But don't go away after we finish. Just hang around for a little while, and we'll talk to you about rebooking you to come on, and your wife to come on.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. And everyone, thank you again for listening to another edition of Paranormal UK Radio. And Irene, where can we be heard?
Everywhere.
Damn straight.
Yeah.
So thank you all. Have a great week, and we will catch you next week. And Irene, we'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.